Good evening, everybody. Welcome to what is our probably 8th or 9th show.
Oh, yeah, when you're having fun at
And
time
Call the
flies.
Doctor. It is, isn't it? We have a very special guest tonight. It's Dr. Richard Michael. He operates a form of medicine that is rare to this type of, to this community. It's very popular in northern and larger southern cities, but it's actually a very unique thing here, and I would bet you none of you have heard of it, except those that are working with the good doc as his patient. It's on concierge medicine. It's a French word that I have trouble getting out of my mouth. I looked up the term, and what it means is, of course, I knew about it as a form of medicine before, but the term actually means, in the literal French translation, is somebody who lives in a hotel and manages the hotel, kind of like a live-in manager, to cater to the needs of everybody who may stay at the inn. But first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how Rich and I met. I think it started off with you sending me a patient, and then I typically would call about a problem patient, and we had a little didactic, and we talked about him, and then I said something that made him think that I knew a little bit about astronomy, that he knows a lot about astronomy, and that was our personal interaction between us. I, as a kid, built the largest telescope in New Jersey, handmade telescope. He did as well, so that was a segue for us to get to know each other a little bit better. It's a lot of time to make a telescope, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, like 1,000 hours of work. Yeah.
Tedious.
It's precision and precise work is like what we do. So it evolved into a commonality. We also have other things in common, and we both do a ton of mission work, overseas medical work, volunteerism, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
First, tell us a little bit about you, your history, and what brought you to this area,
Sure.
and we'll talk about the specifics of your practice there.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. You know, I'm bilingual because I grew up north, and I can speak northern, but we moved, fortunately, to the south when I was a sophomore in high school. Moved to the Charlotte area, and you would have to drag me back. Maybe on a quick visit, I'll go back up north, but honestly, I went to UNC undergraduate. I got a BS in zoology, changed one shade of blue to another shade of blue, went to Duke for my medical school, and then went across the border briefly for my family medicine residency in Newport News, Virginia. So I decided to come back. My faith is very important to me, and I wanted to find a way to incorporate that into the practice of medicine and to the business of medicine. And back in those days, believe it or not, it was before the internet. Long
Remember
time
those
ago.
days?
Yes. When a fax machine was the wonder of the world, right? Networking.
When it worked.
Yeah, networking was not nearly what it was now, and I started the practice here in Rocky Mount, and it's a long story, but it was an answer to prayer, and lo and behold, all these years later, founded the Family Medical Center in Rocky Mount, a big outfit, and just decided in the last year and a half to take a segue into something different. Didn't feel like my time in medicine was at an end. Had been looking at concierge types of practices, and decided that was for me. So it's been a journey, but I'm kind of an albatross because how many times does a doc settle in one town? I mean,
It's not common.
it doesn't happen a whole lot.
This is
But-
my third or fourth practice.
This is-
But you can't leave now, you gotta
I'm
stay.
not going
We
anywhere.
need
No,
you.
it's called Roots.
I'm here, Gene.
It's called Roots.
Yeah.
Roots.
Well, it takes a while to find roots,
Yeah.
is an issue, and there's many things in a medical practice that have to blend to give you a comfort level, so you can practice the style that you like. I was employed, couldn't stand anybody telling me how to practice. We used to work for Geisinger in Pennsylvania. They limited how many nuns I could no charge. They limited how many people without good insurance I could take. And they would literally not let me put them on the schedule for follow-up exams, and because money is important to some. That's not the experience at UNC. It's certainly not the experience at my practices in Tarboro or in that area or in Rocky Mount with Nash. They've been beyond wonderfully supportive. But I did have that experience in the past, and I settled here with a big smile on my face because those support systems really do exist here, and I'm sure you feel that as well.
Yeah.
It's not common when you go up north that you get that type of treatment as a physician, and there's bigger institutions around here that don't give you that latitude as well. So
Now, I don't know if you know, but as an example of the success of Rocky Mountain Family Medical, I had the honor of presenting to them the Small Business of the Year award. I mean, they check all the boxes as far as giving back to the community, having great customer service. People absolutely love them, and of course, you and Dr. Abel are the founding partners of that. But 35 years they ran that, and
that's
so,
amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us about your astronomy love.
Oh my goodness. That started, gee whiz. My best buddy, this is probably when I was 6, 7, 8 years of age, he said, hey, my dad's going to take his telescope out tonight. You want to come down? Well, anything my buddy did, it was good.
The little competition.
And, I never looked through a telescope, but I think we looked at Saturn plus other stuff. And Saturn just hooked me. That Christmas, my parents, they kept hearing me talk about it, and they got me a telescope from like a Kmart special. And so I started with this little small telescope, but I had to upgrade it. And
Instantly, right?
I upgraded it.
The cheap ones aren't good enough.
I upgraded it to a different mount, of course, duct tape over everything.
Right.
But started doing observing, read books about it. I was kind of a nerd back then as well. And
Just back then.
yeah, just back then. But loved it, and it did keep me off the streets. And my parents always knew, like, he's probably where the telescope is. And so it was great. And, the toys of boys get bigger as they get older. And now I have a telescope. My wife has aptly said, it's aptly named. It's called Obsession. It's
Good for Betty.
It's a 20-inch behemoth. It really looks like a cannon,
Right.
a missile launcher.
In the world of telescopes, 20 inches is huge. The one I made was 16 inches, and
That's
and
huge.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And it was very impressive to see it in the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah.
To tell you guys, just not to believe, because this show is not really about astronomy, but once you see the rings of Saturn, you're hooked.
Oh yeah.
And the red spot on Jupiter, as kids, it was a stunning thing, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot more in common, and something that really links us what we do professionally, and that we do a lot of mission work. We were just talking before the show, and I didn't know that both of us were actually in Haiti at the same time after the earthquake in 2012. I went there the day after the earthquake. Within 12 hours, I was on the ground and went there 5 times afterwards. You were there in March, I believe, when
March.
actually the what you do for a living was needed even more. In the early times, it was trauma. They needed surgeons, and so I hopped on a plane before the airport closed and kind of landed there after the airport closed, a little illegally. But we got in, and so Haiti was a unique experience. But tell us about, we went in different directions. I tended to go towards more trauma. You tended to go towards where you can help people holistically more.
Yeah.
Share with us your experiences.
Yeah, we actually, our leader, because we've been planning that trip for months, came to everybody on the team and said, hey, look, this happened, the airport's iffy. We think we can get in, we think we'll get out. What do you want to do? Things have changed quite a bit. And everybody...
Because getting out was a fear. We were unsure you're getting out of the country.
Yeah. It was, but everybody said, thumbs up, we want to go. It was a tremendous experience. We dealt with lots of different things. Psychological trauma was immense. I mean, people didn't...
Underplayed. People...
They didn't even feel like they could sleep because they were worried with aftershocks, here it comes down again, and over 200,000 people killed in a very short period of time. And even when we were there, when we took one trip into town, we were in Port-au-Prince, and it was devastating. I mean, not to get too gross here, but you could smell the bodies still caught in collapsed structures. So, we wanted to minister to the person's, spiritual, emotional, and physical needs. I mean, there were people literally dying in these tent encampments because the temperatures were hitting 100 degrees
In
already.
these plastic tents, it was
Plastic tents. It was like an oven, you know.
they were cooking.
Yeah.
And so we dealt with it in different ways. I was there amputating as many limbs as I can and sewing horrible lacerations together and bone is sticking through skin and people are coming in without their body parts and it was beyond description, not to gross anybody out, but we were such a physically operating machine that we totally didn't have time to take care of many of the more important things. Not that that wasn't important, but the aftermath, the psychological overlay, and then the fact that, you know, a hypertensive diabetic who hasn't had their medicine forever
Right.
was realizing medical problems that were out of my league to begin with treating anyway, but the second wave of doctors that came were in many regards, a much more important group of lifesavers
Yeah.
than those of us who patched up holes and took off dead pieces of tissue.
We literally had one room in this alcove where it was basically a pharmacy.
Right.
And so we had medical students helping us dispense meds and all
Yeah.
sorts of things.
It's tough. Where else have you been besides Haiti?
Yeah, been to Russia probably 4 or 5 times, working in orphanage scenarios there. Some hilarious things when I did a medical clinic in an outlying town. And then been to Israel several times and to Cuba several times. So-
Yeah, I'd love to go to Cuba and help there. I've been almost to every Caribbean country, not the side where the resorts are on. The northern leeward side is incredible poverty. Helped start a clinic in the Bahamas. I've been to Ecuador 30 times.
wow.
And I'm working at a hospital in Honduras and was going there twice a year until COVID kicked in. And where I communicate with my patients through an app called WhatsApp. It's very common in Latin America, not so much here. And talk to my patients regularly on that venue. But mission work is something that helps us complete what we just can't fix in this country, fix within us in this country, because we're so privileged in this country. There are things that we just can't do in this country that we'll never see, that we see overseas, particularly in deformed children and things like that. So we're going to take a break in a second, and start taking some telephone calls. We're going to further define the real definition of concierge medicine. Am I pronouncing that right?
Concierge.
No, I'm not going to say it that way ever.
Concierge.
But we're going to redefine it and how it is a system of providing health care that's growing in the United States, but it has its feet on the ground in Rocky Mount. We'll talk about that on the backside. We'll see you in a minute.
Join us for the 49th Spring Hope National Pumpkin Festival, October 1st, 4 p.m. through 10 p.m., and October 2nd, 9 a.m. through 4 p.m. The weekend will be filled with food, crafts, shopping, activities, music, and dancing. Swing by for a day of music with Russ James, then a concert Friday night at the Depot with the Sleepin' Booty Band. The fun continues Saturday with bouncy houses for the kids, crafters, giant pumpkin way-off, food trucks galore, a parade in the afternoon, and music by Heads Up Penny. Come and celebrate a weekend of fun at the Spring Hope National Pumpkin Festival. It's October 1st and 2nd.
Hello, my name is Spencer Bellamy with Premier Equipment Company. We're here outside of Tarboro today, cutting and baling some hay, and I got Randy Davis here.
That's right, we're out here demonstrating the technology that's in our baling equipment today. And we're specifically using IntelliBale, which fully automates our baling process on our hay balers. So what normally took an operator multiple steps to stop the machine, turn around, look at the baler, wrap the bale, and eject the bale, we fully automated that system now by marrying the baler to the tractor, and basically the baler tells the tractor what to do.
Well, the IntelliBale technology takes a lot of fatigue off of the customer. They're not having to watch their monitor quite as closely for bale size, things like that. They can mainly focus on while they're running the baler and where the tractor is and the location of the tractor. The tractor is going to take care of stopping, wrapping the bale, telling you when it's time to start again. It's just one more thing that's off the customer. And with a field as big as these, you're going to see, so many bales are produced. That makes a huge difference in how that customer feels at the end of the day, and ultimately their productivity and the quality of the bale and all that kind of stuff. Premier Equipment of Rocky Mount, they have a great commitment to service, trained technicians, really good service trucks that are equipped, can handle anything out in the field. We really appreciate that as a dealer partner, being able to keep our customers up and running.
Join us to commemorate the life of Officer Chris Batman Driver as we present a Night of the Embers featuring Craig Woolard at the Powerhouse on Falls Road. It'll be an incredible night of spirits, dancing, music, and a silent auction, all held on September the 23rd at 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., commemorating the life of a hero, Chris Batman Driver. All proceeds will go to his memorial fund. Get your tickets today at Eventbrite or on the Facebook memorial page for Officer Chris Batman Driver.
Listen up, Nash County. What would you do right now with $1,000? Picture how that money would be spent. Because if you've got talent, the Nash Arts Council is giving away cash prizes of up to $1,000 for you to show it off at their upcoming competition. Nash County's Got Talent. Auditions will be held September 27th and the 28th. Call 252-459-4734 to schedule your audition right now. Registration is $25 for an individual, $50 for a group, and all ages 13 and older are accepted. So bring your A game, because 3 winners will be picked to earn cash prizes of up to $1,000 for first place, $500 for second, and $250 for third. If you've got talent worth seeing, now's your chance to shine. Your audition is waiting. Register today, nasharts.org, or call 252-459-4734 for your chance to win.
Welcome back from our first break. So, while we're on break, we were deciding that I actually was pronouncing it right in the French way, and you had a little Southern twist to it.
Southern twist.
Yours sounds better, though, and it's easier off your tongue. The word concierge.
Concierge.
So, let's talk about that form of medicine. The traditional form of practicing medicine is like what 99% of us do. It's what I do. It's called volume-based. Will you define that for us and then explain to us what this hard-to-describe term is, or hard-to-pronounce term is, that really defines a more personal care approach. Not that you get bad care on the other model. There's room for both models to exist.
Right.
But help us understand, because this may be a model of medicine and will be a model of medicine that's growing in our community, and you're on the forefront of this, and so it's important that our public understands this new style of medicine, at least new to this area. It's incredibly successful in many parts of the world. All of my family, in fact, use physicians that practice like you, rarely like me. So help define us what this is.
Yeah, great question. All right. So I lived in the volume side of medicine and founded a practice that was volume-based 35 years. So let's do point counterpoint. Some of the things that distinguish it, honestly, is time. Time is the most valuable commodity I think a person can have, besides health, wealth, time. We only have so much in a day. And so if you give a good, well-intentioned physician time, amazing things happen. Amazing things happen. And my volume practice, a typical family doc nowadays, it probably has a census of between 2,500 and 3,000 patients. Mine was actually higher than that. Wow. The volume, it's changed so much over the years.
So how many patients would you see a day?
24, 25 a day. Now, when you're dealing with multiple complex problems in interacting, and multiple medications, and everything's multiple, you get worn out. And the average time a family doc gives to a patient is about 8 to 10 minutes. You spend more time waiting to see the doctor than you do actually seeing the doctor. So,
and we always run behind.
Yeah, because there's always oh, by the way.
Right.
And you do feel like, okay, I'll answer that question because it's a good question. But then, 5 minutes multiplied times 10 people in the morning, you're already an hour behind. And you feel guilty about doing that, but you want to give people time because you know that how valuable that is. So in the concierge model now, actually it's set up where a busy day for me is 8 to 10 people, and we give 30 minutes instead of the 8 to 10. So in 30 minutes, honestly, we can cover a lot of ground. And what I've done over the past couple of years, and we could talk about this in a different program, is I've become much more open to not just writing a prescription, because so many things can be accomplished without necessarily a prescription, but it involves lifestyle changes. We've seen amazing lifestyle changes, but you gotta have time to explain that to somebody. If you don't have time, then they walk out and they don't know really what to do, except the doctor said I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know what it is. So honestly, that time element is key. The personalization, I loved your segue to this about the person who's in the hotel or whatever, and making sure that every person has what they need. And MD VIP, the group that I'm aligned with, is MD Value in Prevention. And we do some amazing things. Honestly, Mark, I had to read up on some of these tests. I had never performed them before. But for our listeners, basically what it is this. If you're driving in your vehicle and you see red lights flashing on the dashboard, you have a couple of choices. It's a dummy light, don't worry about it. That thing comes on all the time. Or you can say, I wonder if that's important.
I better look into that.
I might want to take a look at that. Well, these tests that we do in the executive profile and an executive examination are so involved, so detailed, but they give me a window into what's going on. And honestly, one of the most rewarding things about this practice is not just that the patients have more time, that they get their questions answered, that there's a doc who says there may be an alternative besides just another prescription. But they get an analysis that, honestly, it's with the big boys. It's in the top 4 to 5 in the country in terms of executive examinations. So you're playing with Duke, you're playing with Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and it's come down that that's how detailed this examination is. So we've detected all sorts of things. I mean, vitamin D deficiency. Is that important nowadays?
Huge.
Vitamin D is huge.
Huge.
Because it gives us a leg up on that big bad virus out there. Okay?
Right.
It may define who has a good outcome and has not such a good outcome.
It may be the difference is, did you blow off your COVID infection or did you get intubated in the ICU?
Exactly.
If you have low vitamin D levels, it's not just for what I do to keep your bones healthy.
Exactly. It plays that role, but it's even more.
It's supporting your immune system is what we're talking about.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And here's the rub, though. Insurance kind of, in a way, it works against us in many things that we try to do for our patients. And one of them is, if you read about vitamin D, like, Doc, I just checked my vitamin D. I've heard it's really important. If I run that test on you and you have no symptoms, basically what's going to happen is insurance is going to trip that out. It's going to say, you better pay for that.
Right, they won't pay for some of the testing.
They won't pay for some of the testing. It's
Let me
too
interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
We have a call coming in. Let's take our call in.
I think Sandra's answering in the other room, so.
Okay.
Sandra, are you okay? Do you want us to take it?
So,
So some of the testing.
We'll proceed.
Yeah. And so we're uncovering things that we didn't know were there. I mean,
Because you have the time to do it.
yeah, and
So-
we're doing the investigation.
And that works because I try to do that in my practice as much as I can. And if somebody says, hey, by the way, would you take a look at this, something that they didn't make an appointment for, I will give them that time. And that's most of our patients, to tell the truth. So if I try to invest as much time as possible, you get great reviews for that. Everybody, in my reviews, I get wonderful reviews for not missing much or anything. And but I get trashed in my reviews that I'm always running behind, right? So you can't give as much time as every person needs on one end and not be criticized for running an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours behind on the other, right? It's a catch-22, isn't it? Your model gives you the time and patient satisfaction.
Exactly.
Right.
Our patients spend 5 minutes waiting to see me.
Right.
Wow.
Just long enough to get their coffee, their water, or their whatever, and then they come in and they're saying,
Okay, you're on the air. What's your question, please? Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
How you doing? Hey, this is Robert Sykes, and hi, Gene.
Hey, Robert. How are you? You've got a question for Dr. Michael?
Not a question, but in the beginning of this, I listened to the explanations by both incredible doctors, and I'm just so amazed and overwhelmed at the time and effort they put into humanity. It's just overwhelming to hear this and to know that now I'm associated with Dr. Richard Michael for so many years. He's been my personal doctor for at least 30 years, maybe more. So when he moved into this program a couple of years ago, you know, everybody had questions about how it would work and what it would be. And I just wanted to say to the audience listening tonight, I have now been in it. My wife and I both have been in the program for about 2 years. And I wanted to say, as they continue to explain this, I wanted the audience to hear in advance from somebody that's already been in it how important this has been in our lives. When we decided to make what I would call this investment, it was a little bit different. And then we came home and compared notes on the things that we did invest money in: home improvement, furniture, vehicles, other material things, entertainment. And we got thinking, you know, going into our late 60s, the investment in our life is more important than anything. But we went into it, you know, still wondering, you know, how will this work? Well, I want to tell you, you know, first of all, the attention that we get individually when we go is, you can't even explain it in a normal medical terms, because it's so expanded beyond what we normally receive. And it's almost impossible to do, as Richard talked about earlier. When you have that many patients and that much time in a day, you just can't get this. But we knew as we got older, this was going to be the most important thing that we could invest our money in, and our time as well. I have learned things about my health, and I think I'm a pretty healthy person, and I have been, fortunately. But these tests and this time that Richard Michael has put into my life since I joined this has led me into some areas that I was not aware of, that I had some issues with. Not anything drastic, but catching them in advance, cholesterol and plaque and things like that. I'm a guy that goes to the YMCA every day of my life for 40 years. I'm healthy. I'm good in my mind. But I realize with family history and other issues that doesn't always mean it's a guarantee. So we started myself on a program recently that will avoid some of these things going forward for me. And he's done the same thing for my wife, Janet. And the attention and the expertise that we receive with his staff and with him, but it goes beyond the medical side of it. When we sit down for our physical, which sometimes lasts 2 hours, I want to remind everybody in the audience tonight, it's not 30 minutes, it's 2 hours. If I want it to be an hour or hour and a half or two, that's totally up. And the questions and answers don't stop until I'm ready. It's about my life, my job, my stress, my faith, my sleep. And then we've had programs that he's provided with dietitians and other experts that he's brought in from Duke that we would not have received otherwise. But it's just a wonderful way to find out what is going on with your life and your health, well beyond what anything I could have ever imagined. So I've got somebody that's an advocate for me, and Dr. Michael. This program is something that I would highly recommend. And as y'all continue to describe this, you will learn more about it. But I wanted to get ahead of that and tell you how good it is. Thank you for your time.
Robert, thank you. That sounds wonderful. I have to ask you, is he the reason you can sing so well?
Well,
just a little aside. I mean, that's a joke, obviously, but
Gene, more important, he keeps my mind well enough to remember the words.
Okay, great.
That's even better.
Dr. Michael, I'm sure you appreciate his call.
Thanks, Robert. I'll pay you later.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
So Robert did mention something that was very important. He used the word invest, that you invest time into it. The word invest also means financial implications, right? And the nemesis, I think, of medicine, not just your old practice, but certainly my current practice, and I think the thing that probably ruins medicine more than anything in the world, particularly in the United States, are insurance companies. I personally believe that no insurance company executive will ever sit at the right hand of God, and many of them are going to be a whole lot warmer than they think they're going to be, right? Because they only make money at the expense of not paying you for your services, or me for mine, or the patient for theirs, right? The money has to go someplace, and they get bonused by not paying the patient or for patient services. And it doesn't make sense that an executive at Blue Cross makes millions of dollars a year, while your deductible as a viewer goes up from to $3,500 or $5,000 a year. Insanity. We should all challenge our politicians who take money from the Blues and United Health and all the other commercial insurance companies, because they're fighting against universal health care and things that really would help the bulk of our population that needs health care, that may not be able to afford your services. So let's talk about insurance companies and how they are dealt with in a concierge practice.
Sure. There's different models of concierge practice. In my particular one, we allow the patient to, continue with their insurance, whatever that is, whether it's commercial, Blue Cross, whatever. But we joke about it. That executive exam that's so high-powered, where we budget out at least 90 minutes for your debrief. A debrief is their initial exam? Yes. You spend an hour in the initial period, and then there's about a 2-week gap where we get the information in, and then I sift through that and come up with a game plan, and then I do a 90-minute debrief with you. So that's the thing that's in the top 5, 6 in the country. But we joke about it. We say, your insurance company doesn't even know you're in the building because the handcuffs are off. I think Dr. Perlmutter said this very well. Insurance will put handcuffs on us as physicians and you as patients, because quite honestly, with certain preventive care, they're good. Immunizations, we'll talk about that a little later. Immunizations, they're good. For ladies, pap smears, mammograms at appropriate times, bone densities. They're trying to hit some of those hot topics, those things that are needed. But the big gap, and it's been this way for over the 20 years that MDVIP's been in existence, and they saw this in the early years, and it's this: cardiovascular death, folks. As bad as COVID is, as bad as cancer is, cardiovascular death has reigned supreme in terms of causes of death in this country. And if it's going to take you out early, it's generally going to be cardiovascular. And so the big gap in insurance coverage is they don't cover that well. So it's like if there's a ticking noise in that corner over there, we're all going to get a little nervous because we're going to say, hey, Sandra, should you check that thing over there? It might be a bomb ready to go off, right? Well, insurance, I hate to say it, in some regards with cardiovascular, they'd rather have the bomb go off and then they'll pay to
Respond to the explosion.
They'll pay to piece you together again as best they can. Our view in MDVIP in my concierge practice is if we hear the ticking noise, let's go after that. And how are you going to know if it's ticking? If you cannot detect a problem before it becomes symptomatic, you won't know it exists until you have your stroke, until you have your heart attack. And what we're finding now is that age doesn't protect you necessarily. We live in a society where things are different than they used to be. I found plaque as early as age 26.
Plaque meaning the
Plaque
material
buildup
that
in the
blocks a
arteries.
blood vessel.
Wow.
And it will continue unabated to grow unless you know you have an issue. If you have an issue, then at least we can outline some ways to keep that plaque from growing.
So just to regress a second, plaque is the material that lines the inside of blood vessels that make them narrower, that can give you a heart attack if it's in your coronary arteries, or that plaque can break free and your carotid arteries go into your brain and block blood flow and give you a stroke.
Correct.
So
Bad
plaque is an
stuff.
important issue.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. And discovering it
26.
early.
Yeah,
is-
26 years old, you found?
26 is the youngest I've detected it. Lots of people in their mid-30s.
So she has a family disease, right? She has a genetically based disease, and so you can take that information, go to the insurance company and say, hey, we have a family member who's predisposed to dying early from a disease. I'd like to work up the rest of the family, but since there's been no even ticking heard in that bomb, often the care is denied.
Yeah, so, and I've engaged a world-class expert who has the instruments and the training to be able to do this type of testing, negotiated a fee lower than he would normally charge. So, what we're trying to do is to help people to find out what is your health right now. And no matter where you are when you walk into our practice, we're trying to find you on a better path to a better health. And that road is different for different people. It's filled with ups and downs, but we're there with you. And as I tell patients who come in for a meet and greet, you're stuck with me. There's no PAs, there's no nurse practitioners. So I'm the guy that, one of the scariest things about this, they have my contact information. They can get me.
Right.
And I know you're very good about that.
Every patient gets our cell phone, right?
But we're unique.
Right.
And in this day and age. And honestly, the patients respect that, but you have a point of contact. So, it's an amazing, it's a freeing up thing for a patient, honestly.
It is. I mean, in 25 years, before there were cell phones, there were beepers, and in 25 years, I can count on one hand the number of times I've regretted sharing my personal contact information with somebody. I can count thousands of times it saved my butt, right? Because a dressing was too tight, or they had a complication with a medicine, and if I can head that off with a telephone call and save them a 6-hour trip to an emergency room, or they don't contact me at all and they think that a small problem to them, which could be a huge problem to me, if we don't address that, there's a problem, right? So direct and intimate communication with a patient is super critical for quality care.
Absolutely.
And we both have done that from the beginning.
Yeah.
So a third thing we have in common. You talk about how the executive exam has changed the experience for the patient. How did it change it for you?
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's an immense thing for us. I'll give you some examples. I've detected 2 cancers, and some cancers are bad, but they don't necessarily kill you necessarily, but these were types of cancers that would kill you, take you out. And having extra time in the exam room during that 90-minute debrief, found a skin lesion, and it was one of those that you just you don't want to miss. And I said, I think this one looks like we want to.
So you're able to give them that extra time?
Oh, yeah.
Let me interrupt you for a second. We have an incoming call
All right,
that wants to
sure.
pick your brain.
Let's do it. Let's
Okay,
do
you're
it.
on the air.
Hey, Dr. Michael, this is Janet Bethune. I have a question about concierge medicine. It's wonderful that you would be able to see your doctor more readily between 9 and 5. But what about after hours? My husband recently had a problem with a very painful hernia at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm certainly not a doctor, and I didn't know what to do. He was in such pain, he wanted me to take him to the hospital, which under these COVID circumstances is impossible. Would I have been able to call a doctor if I was in the concierge medicine group?
Good question.
Yeah,
But
great question. Again, as one of the gulps in going through this and changing from volume-based to the concierge model was actually saying to the patients, you can get me unless I'm on a missions trip, because internet and cell phones are problematic. So that would be the time where I'd have somebody covering for me. But otherwise, I'm it. I am it. Now, it's great because I know your situation. I would know your situation as a patient. What better person to run it through? Because if you're having to deal with whoever is on call, they may not know you very well. Now they
Exactly.
they may be able to pull you up on the computer, but it's not the same as knowing that patient. So I would say that patients protect that time. If I get a call after hours, I'm going to handle that, and we're going to deal with that situation. It's the flip side. I had a patient this week who I wanted to get in to see a specialist, and it was not an orthopedic surgeon.
I know, because I would have seen it.
I know. But it was a different kind of surgical specialty, and, they had a hotline, and I started on Monday, and I left 3 messages. I left another one today. I'm just doing some stopgap things for this patient, but it was so frustrating because I said, gee whiz, this is the hotline and I'm not getting a response as a doctor, It's
Right.
like, wow.
Oh my God.
So I went to bat for the patient. Right at the end of the day, got the call back from the specialty group, and before 5, she had left a message. I've got my appointment to be seen tomorrow at 8 o'clock in this clinic. Thank you. So, honestly, what we do is we go to bat. We go to bat for our patient.
Right.
Now, if I'm seeing 25 people that day, I don't have time to spend on the phone doing 3 and 4 calls for that patient. But in this concierge model, I had the time.
A very critical
and I wanted
point,
to do it.
because I hire legions of incredibly talented and good people to help me with that, because the
Right.
volumes of calls with a more volume-based
Janet, I'm
practice
going to let you go, okay?
is huge. Thank you, Janet. It's huge, and so we need an army of people to return those calls and receive those calls and call in lab results and assimilate all that information.
And often when I call and I'm trying to get in and say, if you're a doctor, press this, if you're into giving, and I so want to press that I'm a doctor because I know I'm going to either get the voicemail or something, and that's amazing that you
Well,
even had to.
and another thing about our practice, just from the patient standpoint, don't you hate it when you get that phone tree and you can't get a live person? You really can't get a live person.
And then you have to play them all over again because you hope down there somewhere there would be something you could press for talking to somebody, but then you have to press to start over again because you forgot all the options, none of which we're talking to
Still
a
better
person.
than calling CVS.
Yes.
We had a question earlier, I'm not sure if it called in or we took a note regarding COVID. Do we have that written down?
Yeah, well, I could tell you, in fact, he would be...
While you're looking for that question, let me just mention my staff, because when you call in, I've got 2 staff members. My office manager is Bridget Pridgeon. By the way, Bridget, congratulations on your new grandkid. We were praying for
Nothing's
your daughter.
better. Nothing's better.
And little Maddie, and congratulations on that. But I've got Bridget Pridgeon and Harley Lancaster, and they're wonderful staff. When you come in to, now a doctor's office we don't look like a doctor's office because it's decorated. We have a theme, but Bridget takes pride in, and everybody comes in an office, it's comforting. It's really comforting. We have it set up for fall now, so we have different themes, but the idea is travel. And so I have a great staff, and you don't go through a phone tree, you get somebody live.
You're on the air. What's your question, please?
Tell me the bottom line. What does it cost, and do I get multiple discounts for many members in the family?
Okay, and after that, you had a comment about that you had sent to me earlier, this is Lanny Shupp, by the way, about COVID and the benefit of having a personal person guide you through if you have COVID. So I'd like for you to address that too.
Okay.
Thank you, Lanny.
Sure, thanks for the question. The cost is $1,800. Again, it's an investment.
That's annually, I would assume, right?
Pardon? Annually.
Annually.
Yes. So it works out to about $5 a day. So you think about your specialty coffee. If you think that's valuable to have, then you want to invest in your health. That covers the executive exam. So it's obviously not going to be for everybody because of cost, but I do think that the value, you just have to consider that value. I see dependents up through the age of 26. So if somebody has kids age 10 through 26, I see them, there's no fee for them, okay, in terms of an annual fee. And spouses, we still charge the same amount. So sometimes they'll cycle that through. They'll say, you get it this year, I'll get it next year. So that's the fee structure of it. In terms of COVID, I think, COVID is so scary, honestly, folks. It's a scary disease. It goes all the way from mildly symptomatic all the way to death. And it's killing a lot of us in our communities. To have one person that you can go to for information, to bounce back and forth. Some of the questions that we have to answer about COVID aren't simply yes nos. Mm-hmm. It takes time to interact. People have concerns. People have questions. Where do we go? And I think that having the time to do that. I mean, part of the worst thing is the unknown in medicine. We don't know. Exploring that and teasing that out is so important with our patients, and so having that is really important.
I often tell people, take an advocate with you if you're going to a doctor for some of these real fast in and out.
Very important.
And you're the advocate if somebody has COVID, because I know the hospital's saying in the first 10 days if a person's diagnosed, they can get the Regeneron, the monoclonal antibody infusion. That's life-saving. And to have someone like you who diagnoses it immediately and makes sure they get that infusion.
Just had that discussion today.
Yeah.
But even more life-saving than that is to get the vaccine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk to us about people who have died after COVID exposure who may not have been registered as a COVID death because they've gotten COVID exposure. They, on paper, recovered from it, but then a month later they pass away, or 2 weeks later, and they die of heart disease or a stroke. Right. Does COVID really have a role in that? Because one of the things you have to look at is every year in our country, 16% of our nursing home population passes away from natural causes every year. During COVID, that 16% doubled for some mysterious reason. Twice as many heart attacks, twice as many natural deaths, twice as many strokes. But were they really from that?
Yeah.
Does COVID have an effect on the number of strokes and the number of heart attacks that are thereby maybe making us count less people as a COVID death than we should have been?
Sure. Great point, Mark. And what I'll say is this. The postmortem studies, and we'll use flu because that's a little more known, but the problem with these viral infections is they create what we call scientifically a cytokine storm. It's basically amping up your inflammatory reaction in your body, but it goes overboard. Okay, so there's an acute inflammation phase that's appropriate. You're trying to battle something that's foreign to your body that could harm you greatly. But then this this storm takes place, and it goes way over the top. And remember, folks, we mentioned plaque, those little buildups, those little bubbles, those little thickenings in the wall of the arteries. Well, what happens is, in postmortem studies, they've seen this, those nice firm caps over those bubbles, if you will, become soft, and they literally kind of explode. And so now you've got, as Dr. Perlmutter said, you've got this thing where it's causing plaque, it's causing clot. That clot can block up the flow of the blood, it can drift off downstream, and it causes strokes and heart attacks. And that's what's happening late. And honestly, folks, with the COVID, we've only got a year and a half of experience with something like this, but we already know it causes major, major inflammation, storms, and that is what the late causes of death may be occurring from. Now,
And they may not be counted as a COVID.
That's right. It's counted as something else.
Right. So people who
the
say,
trigger
my mother had COVID and survived, but darn if she didn't have a heart attack 2 months later.
Right.
May actually been because she didn't appropriately prevent the COVID from getting to her. That's an important point, because the disease is longer lasting. A point I take to my patients is it invades your nose and in your tongue because you lose taste and smell. By definition, that means that it's living in your nervous system. Who's to know that it's not the cause of some type of Alzheimer's disease, or because viruses do hide in our nervous system. That's why chickenpox will turn up to be a shingles infection, incredibly painful, the most painful disease in the world. 20, 50 years later, right? Because it hibernated in your nervous system until your immune system drops with age, or with diabetes or other stresses in your life.
Correct.
If it's still living in your nervous system, in your brain, how do we know what effect? Will it be the responsibility for your Alzheimer's that you otherwise would have never had?
Right,
We just don't know these things.
Don't expose yourselves, folks, to oxidative stress. We do it through our lifestyle decisions. We do it through, a lack of just simple things: getting good sleep, getting exercise, appropriate exercise, eating a good diet, all these things that we understand. But then there's these outside sources, and if we have a safe, effective way to possibly prevent those external things from damages and causing what we call oxidative stress within our bodies, why not take advantage of that?
Right. So when you look at COVID, for example, and that's the biggest healthcare threat to every single person in the world today, when you look at recent statistics, because both of us spend a lot of time, extra time, talking to patients. I give my cell phone number out to people and invite them to call me late in the evening. I've done it 10 times a day to call me after the show. Let me give you the straight information on COVID, because when you look at the numbers, they're scary. 99.9% of the people in the intensive care unit today, because of COVID, are not vaccinated. That number should speak volumes to you. 1 out of 450 people, Americans, are dead because of it. That number should scream at you. That's a greater death rate than if you were a Vietnam-aged veteran or a Vietnam-aged person like my age. That increases my death rate to a greater degree than if I did 4 tours of duty in Vietnam. Or 10 tours of duty as an active foot soldier in Afghanistan, which I wouldn't want to do 1 tour of duty, 1 day of duty, but my risk of dying of COVID unvaccinated is greater than 10 tours of duty in Afghanistan. And there's a lot of social misinformation going on, and there's a lot of information being passed on by people who are not medical experts, some of which are pastors, and that's a big problem, I think, that I'm seeing in my practice. Pastors can inadvertently misguide people because they're teachers, and anybody who serves a role as a teacher can pass on misinformation. In the Bible, there was leprosy, and that was a disease that we talked about quarantining for. We talked about isolation, and that's really the premise of wearing a mask and not going into social events like football games without being vaccinated or protecting yourself or the people around you with a mask. That's been written about heavily in the Bible, and it can't be discounted. Of all the apostles, there were 2 that really weren't lay people. right? Which one was a physician, and so we can't ignore the advice of physicians. There were no evangelical pastors as apostles. They all became them, but they were not them. They were lay people. The only other person who was a lay person, who was not a lay person, was a tax collector, probably the most educated of the apostles, and he wrote, if you are sick, see a doctor. If you're well, you don't have to. So follow the apostles' advice. See a doctor if you're sick. Follow our advice. There's a reason why 99% of doctors are vaccinated, because we do know something that the average public doesn't. 100% of infectious disease doctors are vaccinated. 100% of immunologists are vaccinated. And it's because we do know something that you may not know. So open your mind, talk to your doctor, whether they're in a volume-based practice like mine or in a personalized practice. We're all willing to spend time with you. There's not a bad physician in this community. We all want you to live. Remember, get vaccinated. The life you save may not be just your own. It may be the one that you love the most, that you may transmit that disease to and be directly responsible for their death. So please act ethically responsible. Strongly consider the vaccination. There should be on the screen my email address. It's at the bottom. I invite the entire viewing audience to email me directly, and I will be happy to respond to you with facts.
And the other number is Dr. Michael's office
right.
number.
Correct. And we do meet and greets if you're interested in learning more about us and meeting us, kicking the tires, coming on in and meeting me personally. We do a 30-minute meet and greet. You just have to talk to my office staff, and we'll be happy to do that at 451-7043.
Thank you all for joining us. In 2 weeks, we'll be having our next show. We're going to be talking about vein disease.
Right, Carolina Vein Clinic, Dr. Tran is going to come, and he's got all kinds of information. And a lot of people locally physicians refer to him, but he's coming right here and answer all our questions.
We really espouse on this show the beauty of being able to treat most of your problems locally. We have a ton of special providers that can really excel. There are some diseases that just aren't treated in a small community, and horrible vein disease is one of them. So we look forward to Dr. Tran educating us, and Jean and I will be back then and pass that information on to you.
And thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Be well, everybody. Get vaccinated.